says, the man and his wife were both naked and were unashamed. We're both naked and unashamed. The word naked there in the Scripture is the word arom, and it just means to be exposed. And a lot of times we look at that as being a physical nakedness, and it was. But it was also an emotional, a mental, and a spiritual nakedness. God created marriage to be the most intimate relationship on earth. And intimacy means an inner closeness, it means a depth of relationship, and it means unhindered access. That's what intimacy means, unhindered access. They were naked because they had unhindered sexual access to each other's body. But it also means this: I have unhindered access to your thoughts. We can share anything, and there's nothing keeping us from sharing anything. I have unhindered access to your emotions. You will share your emotions with me, and there's not anything that's keeping us emotionally separated. Spiritually, we have unhindered access. That means you'll share your dreams and your deepest inner thoughts, your relationship with God, the things that are going on inside of you. Spiritually, we have unhindered access. That's the way God designed marriage to be. The most intimate relationship on earth, but it can only have that kind of effect in a pure environment. And I'll use Adam and Eve as an example. Adam and Eve were created in a perfect environment, and they had this nakedness. And it says they were unashamed. It was just a natural way for them to live their lives until sin came into the garden. When sin came into the garden, here's what happened. They began to cover themselves, and they began to accuse each other and hide themselves from one another. And this is not the way that God designed marriage. But remember, it was in response to sin. When Karen and I met, I was on my best behavior. And I really was for a long time. I was trying to win her and to win her approval and ultimately just win her affection to make sure that she was mine and she wasn't going to date anybody else. And ultimately she was going to marry me. So all the time that I was pursuing Karen, I was very careful with the words that I spoke. I wasn't my idiot dominant self when we first started. And that's why she fell in love with me, is that I was careful in how I treated her. I was careful in everything that I said and did. And as we would talk, when you first meet each other, you're careful in what you say, you're real guarded in what you say. But the longer you know a person, the more you trust a person, you just begin to open up to that person. That's what aram means. It means, because I know you and because I trust you, I'm just willing to open up to you. This is what happened in our relationship. Well, the more that I knew that Karen was mine and that she was going to marry me and that she was going to date me, and ultimately when we got married, the more abusive I became. I was very verbally abusive. And when I got mad at Karen, I would just lash out at her. I would say things intentionally to hurt her feelings, to keep her from doing certain things or to cause her to do certain things. And I would shame her. I would lecture her. I would do all those things like that. And here's what happened. Every single time, and I never said I was sorry. I wasn't humble. I didn't take responsibility for my behavior. Every time I did that, I didn't know it, but what was happening is Karen was just putting fig leaf after fig leaf on herself. And after several years of marriage, I didn't even know who I was married to. She wouldn't share a thought with me. And I would say, "What are you thinking?" She'd say, "Nothing." That's unnatural for women, because women want to talk. It really is. Because women want to talk. They want to share their hearts. That's where they get their life. Karen was so damaged by what I had done that she didn't want to share a thought with me. Her emotions were very guarded against me because I damaged her so much. Sexually, we did not have sexual intimacy at all. Karen was always good to meet my sexual needs, but we didn't have an intimate relationship. It wasn't the way that God designed marriage to be. And again, in my way of thinking, it was always, she has a problem, she's the one who has the problem, and if I was married to someone who understood how wonderful I really am, then that's the problem. The problem is I'm just married to her, and if I was married to somebody else. Now here's the problem. The problem was, for 3 years of dating and then several years of marriage, I constantly, in fact, once Karen was mine, and I felt like she was devoted to me, I said and did things for years and never took responsibility for them. So just one at a time, Karen would just stop sharing and just begin to withdraw. Well, I went into Karen the night that our marriage began to change, and I told her I'm not going to play golf anymore, and I told her for the first time in our relationship, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I've said. I'm sorry for what I did. And here's what Karen said to me. She stopped me mid-sentence, and when I told her I was sorry, and she looked at me, and I'll never forget it. She said, "The worst thing you've ever done to me are the things that you've said. The things that you've said to me have scarred me worse than anything else you've ever done. It's not the golf. It's not that. It's the way you talk to me." And I said, "Well, I'm sorry." And, you know, she was gracious, but I could also tell she was very guarded. And what happened the next morning when I woke up, I just decided I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to treat her like that anymore. And so I tried to change. And I did change. And I woke up the next day, I tried to be more affectionate. I didn't know how to be affectionate, so I tried to be more affectionate. I was more respectful, I was more careful, and I changed my mouth. This is one of the things I changed immediately was my mouth, the way I talked to her. Here's what happened. It was over a period of months that this happened, and I didn't know what it was back then, but I do today. The fig leaves started dropping off. And after a few weeks of me being different, Karen began to share things. And literally, Karen would share something with me, and I would say, "Well, how long has that been going on? How long have you been thinking that?" And she'd say, 3 or 4 years. And I would say, "Well, why didn't you ever tell me?" And she would say, "Well, Jimmy, I couldn't tell you stuff like that. You wouldn't listen to me. You would shame me. You'd put me down." And I just listened to her. And after several years, what happened was that the fig leaves just fell off. I mean, the longer I was careful about my behavior and did the right thing, and the most important thing is you're going to make mistakes. All of us make mistakes. But it's saying you're sorry. I went for basically 6 years never saying I was sorry. I just thought the world would implode if I said I was sorry. But what I found out was the world gets a lot better when you take responsibility for what you're doing wrong. And I told Karen that first night, "I'm sorry, I was wrong." And I got so good at saying I was sorry and I was wrong. I mean, and it wasn't a cop-out, but I just got where I said it all the time. I began to take responsibility for my behavior. And here's what Karen realized. I'm safe around him again.
Thank you for joining us. Partner with Marriage Today and receive the Marriage on the Rock series on CD or DVD. Follow your interests and get social by connecting with Jimmy and Karen and the Ministry of Marriage Today on Twitter. Marriage Today's latest book, Happy, Happy Love, will supercharge your marriage with practical tips, wisdom, and inspiration for every stage of marriage. Visit happylovebook.com. Become a rock-solid partner today and equip yourself with the tools you need for a successful marriage. $14, $28, or $56 per month. Choose the partnership level that's right for you. Become a rock-solid partner today.